If you would ask someone, why do you play poker? And he says, yeah, because of the money and freedom. And then the next level would be, why do you want to have a lot of money and freedom? And then the next why would be, because then I can see other cultures and the world, for example, right? And then why do you want to see other cultures in the world? And if you do this enough times, usually 5 to 7 times should be enough, you will find the core reason, your core why. And this can help you a lot by finding the core motivator in terms of poker.
Hi, it's Runchuks. Welcome to my podcast. And the following is my conversation with Karim Chelli. He is a mindset coach working with poker players. We discussed mental game coaching in general, how to choose the best coach for you, how to recognize when you would benefit from coaching. We talk about Karim's background and how he got into this business, his experience as a dating coach, lots of interesting things about relationships and social connection, which is a weak area for a lot of poker players. Anyway, check the timestamps in the description, and please support this podcast by subscribing, liking, and sharing your favorite episodes. If you're on Apple Podcasts, give us 5 stars, and now enjoy this conversation with Karim Chelli. Well, what would be your top advice, like key advice to poker players?
That, like, what I always say, that's a very good question to start with. What I always say is to become the best version of yourself and the best poker player you can be. I think you have to work on 2 different parts. Mm-hmm. The first part is obviously the strategy part. If you don't know what hands to free bet, you'll have a bad time. But if you have some good understanding about the strategy, if you beat the field or beat some stakes, the next step is definitely to work on the second part, which is mindset and performance. Mm-hmm. And I think if you want to reach the highest level, you need to have both sides and to have some understanding at least of both sides. And what I see in a lot of poker players who either come to me or some people I talk to, that it's very common that they say, okay, I have no idea if I'm good or bad. I look for a strategy coach. So what they do is they found a strategy coach, they work with them. But with mindset, I think it's still, a little bit different. Some people, they are in a stable, they're like, yeah, that's the new mindset coach. And they're like, okay, what's that, right? But I think poker is such an interesting game and has so much to do with your mind that you have to have both at some point. At some point, you definitely have to have both.
How can one recognize that they need a mindset coach? Because a lot of people would say, "Hey, listen, I'm fine. I'm fine the way I am. I don't need any advice. I don't need some mental game bullshit," as many people would see it, right? So,
yeah.
How can somebody recognize that maybe they need some help, or maybe they need an advice, maybe they're missing out on something?
I think that the core question here is they should ask themselves, is it my ego that is talking right now when they say that's bullshit? Or is it truly that they don't need help? Right? Sometimes it's just the ego, because working with a mindset coach means usually people, they connect it to okay, there's something wrong with me. And then they go to a mindset coach. And I think that is the problem. But what I always say is don't see it as there's something wrong with you and now we have to fix it, but see it rather as okay, I want to become the best version of myself. And I work with someone who can help me to become, the best player I can be or to unlock my full potential. Mm-hmm. And I think if you see it from this perspective, then the weight goes off, because that's the same reason why poker players go to a strategy coach, because they want to improve. And if they see it okay, I go to a mindset coach because there's something wrong, of course, there's some resistance there. But if you say, okay, I see it the same way as I see working on my strategy, it's also another part is just working on my mindset. I think that is much easier then.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about some specific areas. Which areas do you feel that people need improvement most often? when it
You
comes
mean
to
in terms of
in terms of
in
mental
general?
game. Well, in
Okay.
terms of mental, and again, like mental game mindset, right? It's broad term. It can mean different things to different people, because routine is part of that. Diet can be part of that. Sleeping rhythm can be part of that. So many things can be part of that, right? But what are the key areas where poker players specifically usually struggle with or are suboptimal in?
So as if you remember the first call we had, I told you about the 3 areas, right? So mindset, performance, and then as I call it, optimization, where we take a look at the bigger picture. So it's very different. Some people, they come to me, they're like, yeah, let's talk about a little bit about mindset, a little bit about performance, but mostly about life in general. Some people say, no, like, I have some tilt issues. Let's talk about this. But I would say most people, I'm not sure why, I have an idea why, but could be many reasons. What they are most interested in is the performance part. So they say, okay, I want to perform better. I want to perform on demand. I want to play my A game more often. And that is usually one of the biggest things, or like the biggest changes that I see in my clients when I work with them. That when we start to improve the performance, all of a sudden they're like, okay, wow, I have the best result ever, or like the best week ever. So it's, I would say, like the most requested topic is definitely performance. Yeah.
Well, what would be your sort of top advice in terms of, I mean, obviously not everything applies to everyone, but if you had to choose one advice that is universal, what would it be?
Yeah. So the best advice, I have a good story about this. I remember I had a call with a very good poker player, played like high stakes. He came to my call and he's like, I never worked on my mindset or performance. What is it? Tell me, I'm like, okay, I explained a little bit about these things. And he's like, yeah, performance sounds good. What should I do? What is your tip? Right. And I'm like, so what do you do before you play? Right. And he was like laying in his chair. Right. So what do you do before you play? And he's like, what, a warm up? I'm like, yes, I have no warm up. I sit down, I play, and I see where it goes. Right. I'm like, maybe that's not the best idea. So I would say the easiest way to see improvements in your performance is definitely to think of certain tasks that you can do before a session and certain tasks you can do after your sessions. I always compare it. That's what I teach my clients. What I do with my clients is basically I create a key, and this key gives you access to a door. Behind this door is your best self, the best version of yourself. And what we do is we create like an emotional trigger. So that's the key. And they can access this door or this room whenever they want. And after the session, they close the door and they sleep like a baby. And that is basically what I do with my clients.
All right. So the key purpose of a warm-up session then is to get to the state of high alertness, right? Of high focus. And the purpose of the cooldown session is to leave the work at work, so to say, so that you can actually live your life after, right?
Yeah, like a light switch, basically. Like pre-session, basically the light goes on. Post-session, the light goes off. But in the example that I gave you, if you never turn the light on or off, or if it's just luck, right? If you rely on luck, if the light goes on or off, I think that is not the best idea. Because in poker especially, you have so many things you cannot control. And what we want to focus on is the things we can control. So if we focus on the things we can control and try to optimize them, we will also see improvements in our results. And if we forget about the things, or not forget, but let go of the things we cannot control, we will always have an improvement in focus as well. Because like if we forget about these things and focus on the important stuff, then we also have an improvement there as well.
Yeah. All right. And when it comes to, let's talk about the cooldown first, right? What are some of the most efficient techniques, what do you think, in terms of wrapping up your session?
It's very different. Some people, they like to meditate after the session. Some people like to meditate before the session. Some people like to do it twice, right? But I think the most important thing is definitely like rate your session in a way, or review your session in a way, and say, okay, what was good, what was bad, what can I improve, and basically coach yourself a little bit and say, okay, next time I want to focus more on this or on that. And then I would say something that brings you down. Some people like to go for a walk. Some people like to do a prayer. Some people like to meditate. Whatever it is that calms you down. But just the task alone to say, okay, I block 10 minutes, 15 minutes of my time just to like review the session and then calm down. This alone can help you a lot in terms of your mental calmness, to say, okay, like the door, I close the door basically, right? The mental door. And then they sleep like a baby usually.
Right. And because obviously, if we think about poker players, there's different types of career paths, right? Because the rigid schedules of a tournament player, right? There's much less flexibility, and you have to stay with it till the end, basically, right? You can just spew it off and go to sleep, but usually then why are you doing this, right? So you're supposed to maintain the high level of focus for a long, long time. Cash game players have much more freedom in that sense. We can quit more easily. Doesn't mean that we actually do. A lot of people struggle to quit sessions when they're actually tired because of all sorts of reasons that they usually make up themselves, of like, no, the game's too good. I'll never see the game like this ever again. How do you think, if you worked with cash game players, what is the optimal way to approach a session? A predetermined length, some other cues for when we start the session, finish the session? What do you think in terms of what would be optimal?
Only cash game, right?
Yeah, because tournament players, I mean, it's a different breed, and you can be with all sorts of ideas of I want to only play 2 hours, but hey, you're a tournament player. You're not going to play only 2 hours, right? You're not going to play the time of the day when you want. You're going to play the time of the day when the tournaments are there. Cash game players have so much more freedom, and I think like this freedom is great for people who use it, but it's horrible for people who, I don't want to say abuse it, but who sort of don't see that there's actually freedom, and they still end up messing up their schedules and everything else.
So cool that you mentioned that, because yesterday I had a session with a client of mine who's also from Vienna, and he's a cash game player. So we talked about the length of a session, and what he told me, and this was very interesting because I would consider him as a very good player, but he made a database analysis, and what he said is like in the first 2 hours when he plays a session, he's a winning player, but after like 2.5, 3 hours, he's actually losing after a huge sample. So what I said is like, why do you play so long then? Right? He's like, oh yeah. So what we agreed on is to like stop after 2 hours and just like go on a break. Right? Could be like a 5 minute, 10 minute, 15 minute, whatever he needs, right? Everyone is different. And I think in general, you will see this more often. So I would say if you're a cash game player, definitely after 2 hours, for 5 minutes, refill water, refill snacks. If you don't have an air conditioning thing, then like open the windows, get some fresh air in, right? Get your blood flowing, stand up, move around a little bit, and try to stay awake, right? For the tournament players, for example, they play late at night. If they have a 5 minute break, and what they do is basically like, okay, I'm on a break, grab the phone, and scroll around on social media, and then they continue to play. They will get tired because like they're just like in this like chilled state, basically, where they like sit down and like they don't move the body at all. So what I always say, I'm a big fan of like moving the body, get the blood flowing, try to have enough water. I think that is extremely important. Enough water to drink, fresh air, also extremely important. And basically be active. Be active, and this helps you to calm down if you use your body. And then you will see after, as a cash game player, after 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever you need, you will feel, better. And then you can sit down and play for another 2 hours.
Yeah. And especially for people who are playing, let's say, Zoom pools. Right? The whole point of playing Zoom pool is that it's so easy to join it and so easy to quit and so easy to sit out for even just a minute. Right? And so not to use that luxury, I just don't understand why people do it, right? Because it's obviously much harder for a cash game player who's, let's say, sitting at 12 tables, regular tables. It takes quite some time to sit out on all of them, quite some time to get back. You only have 3 orbits that you can walk away, right? So it's much harder. It becomes more of a necessity to actually completely quit your session after 2 hours and then restart it after, let's say, another hour or so. And then obviously for the high stakes players, there's a completely different set of problems, but I'm pretty sure that most guys at those stakes, they figured out what works for them. So we don't need to focus on this, I guess. But I want to touch upon you and your career choice of becoming a coach. You've been coaching since you're 21, right? And an unusual career choice. And I remember we had a conversation already about how you got into coaching because accidentally you had a chance to do a presentation and you went for it. In fact, tell the story because, to you, it seemed natural. But for most people, if somebody asks you, do you want to present in front of a group of people? The default answer for most people is absolutely not, right? And for you, it was completely different. So please tell the story.
Yeah. So basically, maybe to make it even more interesting for the listeners, I was shy when I was like 16, 17, extremely shy and introverted. But I was always very ambitious, and I always knew that like being shy will hold me back at some point. Because I think if you would ask me with 16 if I would like join your podcast, I would say no, like I'm too shy, right? I'm too shy for it. So this is like some sort of like a limit that you can reach, I think, when you're shy. So shyness is holding you back. So what I said to myself is I want to overcome it. And then certain things happened in my life that drove me to work on myself, right? I got like rejected by a girl that I really liked, and many other things that kept me thinking and started the whole process of like, okay, I want to improve myself. I want to become the best version of myself. And then there was a moment where with a friend of mine, I went to a event, a seminar, and I saw a guy who was also like at the beginning of his 20s, and he gave a seminar, basically like a very good speech. And I'm like, I was whispering to my friend, I'm like, do you see him? I want to be like him. I also want to give speeches. So what I did is I became friends with the people who organized these events. And I remember we were at dinner, and then the person who was the main guy with organizing these events, he got a message, and he's like, oh man, one because we had like 3 people who gave speeches per night. He's like, oh, one of those people got sick, so I have to find someone who can replace him. And then he asked the table, like, do you know someone who would be a good fit? And I was like a little bit shy still then, and I'm like, yeah, maybe I can do it, and like the whole table was looking at me, and he asked like, can you speak, like, are you able to do that? And I'm like, I think so, and he's like, yeah, I give you a chance, right? I give you a chance. And it was definitely not the best speech you ever heard. I can tell you that. But the difference was that the people who spoke before me, because I was the had the third slot. The people who spoke before me, they talked a lot about psychology and like really deep stuff. And like the half of the audience, they're like, okay, that's too complicated. I switch off my brain. And what I did, I went on stage and I'm like, okay, I tell you a story. This is the story that happened. And that is what I learned. And I think that is what I did well, that's what I would improve, right? And people like that. People like, okay, they get a feeling of connection because, they see I'm a human, I'm not perfect. And with a story, I think also it's easier to remember certain things. Mm-hmm. And then they said, okay, I like this guy, I want to see him again. And then it was my second speech. And then they said, okay, I want more. And then a third speech, a fourth speech. And then at some point, the organizer said, people like you, I want to focus on a different part of my business. Do you want to organize these events? I'm like, sure. So I was then the person who organized these events, and yeah.
Wow. So chance opportunity that you grabbed, and here we are.
Yeah, 100%.
And so first coaching direction that you chose was dating coaching, right?
Yes.
Tell me a bit more about that and the lessons that you've learned from working with people in that area.
Mm-hmm. So, I did this for roughly 4 years. And I still have some poker players who come to me and they're like, yeah, I heard you're a dating coach. Is that true? I'm like, yes. Can you help me? I'm like, yes. So it's like the knowledge is not gone. But I learned so many things about psychology in this business. It's really crazy. The first thing that I can tell you is what most guys think that they are born and they're either good with girls or bad with girls. And that's it. They have no power to change that. And I think that is one of the biggest things that people have to realize is like with everything in life, you have a choice. And if you work on certain areas, you can become better and improve them. And it's not by becoming fake. It's basically by communicating your true self. Because what I also learned is that you have like two types of guys. Like if you imagine like you have a good product, but you cannot market it, mm-hmm. No one will buy it. Because the product is maybe the best product on the market, but if you have like shitty marketing, people won't realize it. Same with guys. If you're like the best guy in the world, but you're not able to communicate it, girls won't realize it. And then you have the second part of people, and I don't work with them, who have basically a shitty product, but the best marketing in the world. Mm-hmm. So those are the guys I didn't work with because I'm like, you should have worked on something else first, right? Those like the so-called assholes. But yeah, I would say most people that worked with me, they are just like super good souls, these like very nice guys, but they had no idea how to communicate it. And basically like helping them to find ways how to communicate what they're good at, what they like, their passion, help them already a lot.
Mm-hmm. What were the key areas these guys were struggling with?
First, of course, like the approaching part, right? So like talking to a stranger, no matter if it's a nightclub or like during the day, that was definitely something. And that is also not so easy, right? So if you never did this and I'm like, okay, let's start. And they're like, what? That is one thing, but you will also see then like when they are in a conversation, I also often heard like, what should I say? You can talk forever basically, but I'm different. So basically helping them to communicate freely, because it's usually most of the time, not always, but most of the time a filter that they have in their mind. And the filter is basically constantly saying like, that is not good enough. Like I should not say that, right? Mm-hmm. That is not normal if I would say that. But if you can let go of this filter and communicate freely, you can basically talk forever. That is why some of my speeches, I had like, 5 words on my paper, right? On my notes. I'm like, let's see, right? So I went on stage, I'm like, okay, 5 bullet points. And I talked for like 1.5 hours. And yeah, then the third part is basically what should they do if they have a girl and they date her on a regular basis. How can hold the relationship fresh and keep her interested and stuff like that. I think that are the key areas.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the first two areas, because I feel like for poker players, there's so many poker players who I know who are slightly or varying degrees of socially awkward, right? Because, the somewhat isolating job of playing poker online, a certain type of people choose it to begin with, and it doesn't make the social life easier when you're all the time away. So approaching people in general, never mind for dating purposes, but approaching somebody, for some people it's always a struggle, right? And unfortunately it sets some people back in some other career, business opportunities, or just life opportunities and otherwise. What is your advice in general for people who are struggling to approach a stranger, for example, or approach somebody where they need something from them? How to overcome this anxiety, the fear, or whatever else they might be facing?
Mm-hmm. I had a good conversation with Ben about this topic, because he told me that he has this huge Discord channel, right? Mm-hmm. Of thousands of people in there. And he said sometimes people are afraid to post a hand. Of different reasons. Maybe they think they don't get an answer, or maybe they think people will laugh at them, or they think they are a bad player. So instead of posting there and getting feedback and becoming a better player, the fear is so strong that they say I cannot post a hand there, and they stay at the level that they're at for many months, years, and then at some point they're oh, I'm not becoming better, I'm giving up. Mm-hmm. Instead of just overcoming the fear, posting a hand, getting feedback, applying it, and becoming better. Mm. And what I would say is, of course, there's some fear there, but it's basically like a muscle. So I think to get over fear, no matter if it's approaching someone or posting a hand in Discord or whatever, it's like a muscle. And the more you can leave your comfort zone and step into this fear, the more you train it and the better you can control it. Ben, for example, he also approached this girl on the beach, I think, right? So he went up, he's hey, I'm Ben, how are you? Or whatever he said, I don't know. And they have a beautiful relationship now. So maybe that's another thing, that if people see what's possible, not just in terms of dating, but also in terms of friendship, right? I have many poker friends, and I also got in touch with them by just walking up, talking to them, or posting something in a Discord channel. I'm hey guys, blah, 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 stuff like that. We became friends. So many good things can happen, but you have to put yourself out there. Mm-hmm. And of course it's scary sometimes, or something new. But I think with high risk, and a poker player should know that, with high risk, you also can see some high rewards.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned those people not posting the hands on Discord in the context of what we were discussing, of people being afraid to approach. Because actually, it's really almost the same problem. Is the fear of looking stupid, fear of rejection, right? Because what is the fear if you post a hand on Discord? What's the worst thing that can happen? Somebody who you don't know is gonna say, "Oh, you suck. This is stupid." Well, probably the worst thing is that Ben himself would go and say, "Ah, you suck," and it's stupid. But he would never do that, because that's not the point. And yeah, it's unfortunate, because you're right. It stops a lot of people from getting on the next level, because they don't utilize all the opportunities. And I see it very often of people not being open enough to communicate between themselves in a group. Even if they're working together, they could do more by sharing more of their experiences, sharing more of their insights. Because there's another aspect. There's one aspect of I don't want to look stupid, and another aspect, I don't want to share my genius insight that nobody else in the world knows. Only I figured this out. I'm gonna hold on to it it's my precious. which is also not true, right? Because if you figured something out, chances are a lot of other people have figured the same thing out, right?
Yeah.
So, but what would be your advice for people who how to overcome it? Basically, because you said it's like a muscle. But what's the first step? What's the first step for somebody to realize, listen, it's okay to post something on forum. It's okay to, for example, bump into somebody in the WSOP circuit and say, hey, I'm such and such, admire your work, blah, blah, blah. I have a question for you, right? How many people don't do it? Now, how many people miss out on business opportunities or other opportunities because they don't want to, they're afraid to take that first step? So how to help them?
Yeah, I would say the first question people should ask themselves is like, how strong is my muscle already? Because you have like from like school or whatever, some sort of social muscle is already there. The question is, how strong is it? And if it's like you're afraid to post in a, I don't know, 5,000 Discord channel a hand, if you're afraid of that, then maybe you can find a Facebook group with like 50 people and you're like, okay, I can delete my post there, or like, people seem nice there. And maybe you start there. Or if you're afraid to approach a Victoria's Secret model, then you might say, okay, let's talk to, like a granny, ask for the direction first. And if that is not a problem, then I, move to the next step. And basically start on the level where you're at and train. Same with like going to the gym. If you cannot lift 10 kilograms, then start with 5, and then work your way up until 10, and then like 220, and then so on. Right? I think it's the same principle here.
Yeah. Although if you cannot lift 10 kilograms, you have a big problem, I think. You should really seek out some medical advice. Whoever you are, if you're able to listen to this conversation, you can't lift 10 kilo, you've got a problem.
Yeah, that's true. That is
so
true.
That's, if there's one key piece of information from today's conversation, that's it. I hope we didn't help anyone with this, because if we did, then more so. Right. Yeah, I like the idea of, like you said, if you're afraid to go on Discord, find a different channel, find a smaller channel, find something what you're comfortable with, and same as talking to strangers. Talking to strangers is the same thing. It doesn't matter who they are. Eventually, it doesn't matter. At first, it might seem like, oh my God, now how I would talk to the granny or how I would talk to them. It's completely different thing, but no, not really, right? So the second area, what you've mentioned in a conversation, people would struggle with what should I say? What should I say, basically, right? That was the area that people struggle. So how do you feel about that? Like, do people overthink it? Because you've mentioned this fact that some people have this filter in their brain and thinking of like, this is not great, I shouldn't say that, etc., etc. And I feel, again, it's somewhat common in poker players, especially the more. Now, I don't know. I don't want to categorize poker players, but there's a lot of guys that come to mind who really filter everything they say in any form of conversation, even in a conversation with friends, because there's always this idea of like, now this is minus EV, so to speak, if I say that. What's your advice there?
Yeah, so a little bit of background why we have these filters. Maybe that helps for the listeners. So I think the reason why we have these filters is because we grew up and we learn from school, from our parents, from the social circle we're in, but also from our culture, what is okay to say, what is not okay, but also in terms of behavior, right? For example, another very common thing I saw back then was from the Disney movies or from Hollywood. We learned that, like, no matter who you are, if you fight for a girl and if you like scream at like, 10 p.m., with chocolate in your hand and some flowers, and you're like, yeah, Sarah, open the door, and like, this is how you get a girl and stuff like that. But if you do that, you end up in jail, right? That is the reality. Yeah. So also from these sources, you learn, what's okay to say and what's not okay, and also in terms of behavior. That is when the filter gets created, right? In like when we're teenagers, right, and like become an adult, this is like when the filters like get stronger and stronger, and like of course the filter changes and gets like either stronger or weaker in certain areas. But I think that the core filter develops, until we're 18 or so, right? 18, 21, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And then basically that is why I think also a lot of people say like, okay, I'm now 21. I was never good with girls, and that's it. Like I'm lost, right? I'm lost. But then if you show them, hey, it's possible if you put in the work, and then you help them to find like where the muscle is. Maybe like as a coach, you push them a little bit. You like, let's talk to the granny first, and then like maybe like a girl you're not so attracted to, let's say, right? And then you work your way up, and then they end up usually in the spot where they're like, okay, I run out of things to say. What should I do? And then you have two options, basically helping them and giving them some sort of a structure to say. What I always say is like, and this goes like in the dating coaching now a little bit. But I think if you approach someone, the right mindset to have is basically find out, not just like, am I good for her, right? So it's like, I want to like show her that I'm good, but also find out, is she a good fit for you? So the option one is like, if you run out of things to say, then ask questions and find out if she's a good fit for you as well. Not just say like, oh, I can do this and I could do that, but also say like, okay, like I like girls who are, like, I don't know, have a fashion sense, stuff like that. You seem like a fashion person, right? Blah, 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 right? Many, many options, whatever is important for you. Option two is that we work on the filter and say, okay, where's the filter coming from? Why do you think that way? And there are certain techniques you can, or exercises you can train yourself on, right? I don't know what it's called in English, but it's basically, you can look around in the room, that's the exercise, and you see like a table, and then you build a sentence with the table. It's like, oh, my table is brown. And then you have like the word like my table and brown. Those are like the key words. And then with those three words, you build a new sentence. Brown, like, oh, like, I don't know. I like brown, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then like you build a new sentence with that, right? Or table, stuff like that. You're like, oh, this table doesn't look so expensive. And you're like, expensive. But talking about expensive, like what about this bag that you have here? Stuff like that. And basically with this technique, there's a certain word for it. You can talk forever if you do this exercise. And this also helps you to get rid of this filter, right? But we're going like a little bit deep now, I think, right?
Right. I'm trying to understand. I didn't plan to talk about the dating coaching today, but why not? Because I think this is interesting because the way I see it, that the problem that some of these people are facing is not limited to dating. Dating is just acutely visible for them. Listen, I can't manage to get into a relationship in my life. I struggle with approaching girls, and I would assume it's the same for some girls who are looking for a boyfriend, right? It's not limited to, it's not only a male problem, right? There's a lot of women there feeling the same, right? It might be, some might say, and mostly those some are going to be men, oh, it's much easier for girls to find a boyfriend, right? But it's a question of where do we settle, right? Because it's not that hard for a guy to find a girlfriend. It's pretty hard to find a girlfriend that you're happy with, right? There's the difference. But yeah, I forgot where I was going with this. Yeah, what I see sometimes in some of my friends or acquaintances that I know of, especially in the poker community, some guys don't put in much thought into the whole idea. They have a goal. I need a girlfriend. And then their means, for some people, it would be, okay, I need to seek out a coach. I need to seek out some advice. For some guys, it's a complete opposite. I need to buy a big flashy car. I need to buy the most expensive watch. I need to buy this. I need to buy that, etc., because then it's basically, that problem is solved. Is it though? Right? Because I don't think so, right?
Yeah, that is very nice that you mentioned this, because two things that you said. The first thing is, like, most people say, like, I want a girlfriend and that's it. But it's also about, like, is it a good fit? Because what we want to avoid here in Austria, you have like a divorce rate of over 50%. And I think that is very, like, this shows very good what our point here is, that if you find some girl that is okay, you could end up in the, in the percentage which gets divorced. And I think a divorce is, like, horrible for both sides. So in the ideal case, you don't want to have a divorce and you want to have a happy relationship. And that's why you have to put in a lot of effort, I think. And the effort is not like buying a fancy car and, like, showing off with some Rolex watches, because then you will attract the wrong girls. And that's not, I think, what the ideal goal is, right? If you only think, like, okay, like, if I spend enough money on a girl, she will like me. I think that is not the right approach. Because I can tell you, when I did the dating stuff, I had times where I had no money to go into a nightclub, and I climbed over the walls to get into the nightclub, right? Because I wasn't able to pay $15 for the entry, right? But it was like, I had times where I had, like, no money to, like, go into a nightclub, and it worked out, right? And I had, like, times where, right, I had enough money to go into a nightclub, and it also worked out. So it's really not about the money. Money should be like a bonus, and should be something that you can share with someone that you really like. Could be your friends, could be your girlfriend, but it should not be like, because of money you get friends, because of money you get girls. So I think that the right approach is definitely to find out, okay, what do I want, and what can I offer, right? I give you a small story here as well. I remember when I first got introduced to the dating stuff myself, when I was shy. I bought a book. I can't remember what it was, but it was like a 30-day challenge, and it was like how to get, like, stuff like a more confident after 30 days. I can't remember, something like that. Mm-hmm. And every day you had to do a certain exercise and write certain things down. And I will never forget this. On day one, you had to fill out, like, you had to answer some questions, basically. And the first question was, write down 5 characteristics of your dream girl. And I was sitting there, I'm like, oh, I can choose? And I think it took me like 2 hours to find like the 5 characteristics that I want. The second question was, what are 5 characteristics you can offer to a girl? And I'm like, okay, what can I offer? I have no idea. It took me another 2 hours to write down question number 2. And like, I think it was like 4 or 5 questions. And I think it took me the whole day to answer 5 questions, which should show you that when you start to think about these things, like then you realize, okay, like, you can choose. There's so many things I don't know or I never thought about. And yeah, helped a lot to like get clarity on that. And then you start to think with day 2, with like first challenges or so. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what's funny about it? This how you described your moment of realization. I can choose, right? Which is something that so many people forget, and it applies to basically any walk of life. Because even if we take this limited area of poker players, a lot of poker players actually don't realize they can choose. They can choose to play a different game. They can choose to be a tournament player, a cash game player. They can choose to play deep stack, short stack. They can choose to play this side, that side. They can choose to play in the morning, evening, night, etc. There is freedom. And oftentimes, so many people just forget about it because we get into this routine of we're just doing this and not questioning why we're doing this, forgetting why we're doing this. So yeah, this was just a remark on your realization of, oh wow, I can actually choose.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I think that is like the key essence here. And yeah, some poker players who understand that you can choose, not just like in terms of poker, but in life in general, then they say, okay, let's talk with a mindset coach or like maybe a dating coach or whatever. And that's why Ben said many times that, I'm the holy grail for poker players because of like the dating background, right? What a lot of poker players struggle with, but also a very strong mindset background. And this in combination can help with a lot of changes in life.
Yeah, absolutely. There was something I wanted to ask you, and now it slipped my mind. Yeah, but coming back to, for example, this notion of I can choose, right? And you've described the exercise of taking 5 or listing 5 attributes, what you're looking for, and then 5 attributes that you can offer. Right? How many people in the poker world actually listed 5 things why they play poker, right?
Yeah.
And then listed 5 things why they play exactly the game that they're playing, and not the other game, and not something else, right? Because sure, it looks on surface, oh wow, but it's really difficult to change. I invested so much time into this, which is basically a sunk cost fallacy. I invested so much time and effort, so of course I'm not going to do something else. It's a stupid notion, but unfortunately it is the way it is. And especially in the modern time, it's so easy to find material to experiment with a different game, to seek out help from a coach. And also for some people, it might be, because listen, there are so many poker players who on surface are happy with what they're doing, and deep down somehow are miserable a lot of the time, right? Complaining about all the downswings, complaining about all the injustice that is happening, and et cetera, right? And if some of these people would list everything they like about the game and why they play, and they would realize, well, this is actually awesome, but everything that they don't like and why they struggle, very often the things that they struggle with don't have anything to do with their game. They have everything to do with their life. They're not happy with the routine. They're not happy with how poker destroys their social life because they, now it's obviously the pandemic, so that kind of falls out of the equation. But how many people complained and used to complain that, oh, I can't hang out with my friends outside of poker industry because, well, they want to hang out on Saturday, Sunday, but I grind Saturday, Sundays, and I can't hang out during the day. I'm in the evening, right? A lot of people complained about it. Now, how many people actually went out and changed their routine in such a way to accommodate what they actually want? If you really want to hang out with your friends, is that 0.2 big blinds in your EV, is that really worth sacrificing that part of your life?
100%. Yeah, I agree with you. To add on this, there's another very powerful exercise that I teach my clients when it comes to finding their why, because we talked about this. And it's basically that scientists found out that to find the core reason, you have to ask yourself why you do certain things 5 to 7 times and always go deeper. Mm-hmm. So for example, if you would ask someone, why do you play poker? And he says, yeah, because of the money and freedom. And then the next level would be, why do you want to have a lot of money and freedom? And then the next why would be, because then I can see other cultures and the world, for example, right? And then why do you want to see other cultures in the world? And if you do this enough times, usually 5 to 7 times should be enough, you will find the core reason, your core why. And this can help you a lot by finding the core motivator in terms of poker. Because that is usually, it's not about the money, right? It's the core motivator is usually not about the money.
Yeah.
The core motivator is usually much deeper. And if you do this, as I just said, it can also help you a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like, to be honest, if the core motivator is just the money and you're not already a high stakes poker player, quit and find a job, right? Because there's easier ways to make money, especially in the long term, with building something that has long-term potential and scalability. But because with poker, unless you break out and become a high stakes player, you're not going to be making a shitload of money, right? Obviously, there are regions in the world where being a mid-stakes poker player beats any available possible job that you might get in your country, and then you're blessed to have this opportunity to play poker, right? And it's amazing. And how many people from, well, I don't want to, list the regions. We all know the regions where this is basically the best profession for young guys that they could have, because it does allow them to express themselves in something they like, as opposed to work some shit job and have no money. So you manage to get something that actually fulfills you, and at the same time provides a level of living that is way above the average in the region. So that's amazing. But then in Western Europe, chances are money as a motivation. I mean, come on, please, right? And poker is such a beautiful game. I mean, there's so many other reasons to play it and to commit your God knows how many years. For some people, it's probably worth committing all their life because they're just enjoying it so much, right? So it's beautiful, but if you do it for the right reasons.
Yeah, I mean, if like I talk about this with friends also a lot, because I know some people who started with low stakes and like now they're on the jump between like middle and high stakes. So like at the beginning, we talked a lot about money, because when you play low stakes, you can spend 8 hours and earn like $10, right? You're like, oh shit, right? So you kind of obviously don't live from like $10 in 8 hours, right? But at the end of the day, as you said, it's not about the money. I'm like, because I was asking them like, what is your motivator, right? Because of course, if you earn like $10 in 8 hours, if money is the motivator, you get demotivated very fast. And you're like, no, I love the game so much, and the reward in poker comes at the end, I think. That is what they always say. They say like, okay, the reward in poker comes at the end of your journey, and you will only get to the end of the journey if you love the game. And that is what they told me, and I really like this point of view. And yeah, I think you will get rewarded at basically the end of the journey, right? Or like on the later part of the journey, not the end, because when is the end, but on the later part of the journey. But yeah, I really like their attitude.
Yeah, but there's a problem with this attitude though, because it's all nice and beautiful, almost like a Hollywood script, right? The life is different, because the truth is a lot of people in their journey forget about themselves, and they burn out and they destroy their health, right? And it's crazy to think, like, even some of the high stakes players, right, sleeping like 3-4 hours a day for a year.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a scientist to figure out, like, listen, whatever money you're making, it's probably not worth it, because you're just killing yourself. And scale it down a bit, slow down a bit. It's so hard to slow down for some people, because another aspect with the same journey approach of you're going to get paid in the end or in the later stages is because a lot of people see poker and this ladder of progression, low stakes, mid stakes, high stakes, as if it's a video game, as if it's a leaderboard in a video game, and then let's go and we level up and we beat the next boss, and all this crap which is made up, which is not real, because there is no leaderboard, there is no rainbow in the end of the journey, and like nobody can agree who's better, right? Right now there's some people claiming, I'm better at this form of poker, and then there's going to be an army of people saying, no, you're not better, actually somebody else is better, and then there's complete disagreement because there's no real metric. So whatever video game mentality of the high score you have in your mind, it's just there, it's just in your mind, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think what they wanted to say is basically that if you start low stakes and you're in there for the money, right, it's not worth it. Mm-hmm. So you have to love the game to stay until it's like worth your time, basically.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's of course absolutely true, and which is true in any profession. Like let's not even take something where money is involved. Let's say you have the dream of, I want to play a guitar or I want to play piano, right? Your first couple months, I mean, you have to pay people to listen to you. Right? So you're definitely not doing it for the money. And there's not much joy either. You have to go through it with some intrinsic internal motivation to keep going, right? And eventually the journey is worth it. And then, yes, when you achieve some mastery, you can actually enjoy the process. It's pretty much the same with everything that requires a lot of practice and a lot of skill in the process.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and it's like, I think learning poker and learning an instrument is very similar. But I think also, you probably can also say it's very similar to maybe to get good at dating, right? It's like the same process at the beginning. You might struggle with easy things, and with time you will get better and better and better and level up basically. And yeah, it's also with the gym, right? If you cannot lift 10 kilograms, right? Yeah. Right. At some point you can like maybe, lift more than you could ever imagine if you stick to it.
Yeah, absolutely. But then if we think about the dating, because you've mentioned getting better and better at dating, at some point you get the relationship that you want and you stop practicing so it's somewhat different, right? Because there is not, well, how do you look at that? Like, because yeah, okay, go ahead.
Sorry. So basically it's not that, I think that's also another misconception that people say, okay, I got the girl and it's over, right? But I would not say it's over, because in reality, I'm thinking of how deep I should go now. But I think in reality, you have to put in work to keep the relationship fresh and exciting. Because if this was one of the things why I was so motivated to get good at this topic, because I remember I went to a restaurant and I looked around at the other tables, and what I saw is like other couples, and they're eating and they're like, "Nah, do you like it?" And then you had the feeling that the biggest wish is to be at a different place right now. Mm-hmm. And not with their partner in a good restaurant. And I think here in Austria especially, I see more couples like this who basically don't like being with each other, compared to the couples where they go in a restaurant, they have a good conversation, they smile at each other, the way they look at each other is different. So it's not that you can say okay, I got my girlfriend and then everything else is not necessary or not important. It's basically working on the relationship itself, because also maybe to explain this a little bit further, a relationship is always like a triangle. So you have the guy, you have the girl, and you have the relationship itself as an entity. And you have to put in you have to make sure that there's enough energy and enough love for everyone there, basically. It's a little bit hard to explain. I think like takes like 20-30 minutes to explain this concept.
Yeah, it's a hard sell to say a relationship is like a triangle, because well, not so sure that's not how my relationship looks like.
But it's like in terms of energy, right?
Yeah.
So like the relationship also has to get nurtured in a way, right? So like the triangle in easy terms is basically the guy should still work on himself and try to improve himself and like his business or his passion, whatever. Same with the girl, right? So it's like they should both develop in their own direction, but they should also like give each other love in terms of like cuddling, intimacy and stuff like that. But also like the third entity with the relationship is like keep the relationship fresh in terms of like activities, like new experiences, travel together, stuff like that. So it's basically like, both, like all of those three entities should have enough love and enough energy to keep basically going and then keep this fresh.
So why do people not keep their relationship fresh? Well, what's stopping them?
Yeah, I think like they ignore the triangle, No, but I think that the biggest problem is that you have a lot of routines in the relationship, and then it's just boring then at some point. If you have the same day over and over again, and then you're like, and of course, what I can tell you is like that your weeks, when you see it like in terms of weeks, your weeks will look very similar. And you will have to have certain routines in your life. It's like, it's not possible to say like every day looks different, right? So I'm not saying that, but I'm saying try to find things that she really likes and try to make her happy, but also try to think of things that you like to do, and also like either do them alone or like together or stuff like that. But what I see is basically that most relationships, they become like one person, and then it's not allowed for like those people to do things on their own. And then it's basically what they do is they watch Netflix all day long. And then 5 years later, they're like, I don't love you anymore. I think that is like, of course, there are many other reasons as well, but I think that is one of the most common themes that I see.
Especially now in the pandemic, I guess a lot of people struggle with this because it's pretty hard to have experiences because you can't do anything, depending on where you're based geographically. But at least for the time being, a lot of the world is quite closed down. Do you have some tips and advice of, how can people keep their relationship fresh when they're locked down at home?
Yeah, that is a little bit tricky, of course. But here in Vienna, for example, you can still book some Airbnbs. And you can, if you say, let's do a weekend trip, right? You don't have to do it every weekend. But basically when you say, okay, we're only at home and then the lockdown getting on our nerves, let's drive, to the next city or like the next big city and, walk around there, because you can be outside, right? So if you drive to another city within your country and you walk around, see some sights, that is possible. Or also another poker player that I teach in terms of dating, mostly, he now like has a girlfriend, fresh relationship. And he's like, he asked me the same thing. And I'm like, yeah, you can invite your closest friends. If you want, you can make a test or so. But your closest friends, and just like have a game night or so, where you like each four of you like play certain things or like activity or whatever you would like to do, and basically become a child for a night and keep it fresh that way. I think like I'm not the most creative one, but I think if you sit down and really think of like, okay, how can I make this more fun, more exciting? I'm sure people will think of cool activities to do, even in times of a lockdown.
Yeah. Oh man, we covered kind of two directions at the same time.
Yeah,
We started with
yeah.
the more poker centric mental game, and then we moved on to dating and relationships and socializing in general. All right, so I just wonder how can we tie it up? And we also, of course, talked about how you chose to be a coach, right?
Mhm.
And how you went for this career. And I know I asked you already today in regard of what you learned from your students in the dating, but from all your years in being a coach, what are some of the biggest lessons for yourself that you got either from working with your students or just doing the work? What are some of the key moments for you that stand out?
That first of all, it's 100%. Or let's put it in other words. I think it's a good idea to have some guidance at some point. And what I saw is that most people, it doesn't matter if it's from dating or from poker, most people have at least one area in their life that needs to be improved, let's say, or needs some improvement. And usually it's one area in life that they say, okay, I'm having a hard time figuring it out myself, right? An example that I can give you from my life is I always had like a little bit of a challenge with like the business stuff, because I knew I'm very ambitious. I can build a business, but I was never sure like, okay, which direction should I go? I have so much knowledge in different areas. I think like, I can explain things very well and like go in depth very well and like have a feeling for people. But there was a point in my life where I had some dating clients, I had some like entrepreneurs who worked with me in terms of mindset, I had some poker players, and I'm like, it's like too much at once, right? I have like to cover like 3 niches at once. And I'm like, okay, like I know like I have to niche down, I have to be more specific. So what should I do? And like I also work with a business coach who said to me, like, you should focus on one niche and basically dominate this niche as best as possible because you can help the clients, better. You can understand them better. You can create better content for them because you know their pain points and basically gain a following. And I'm like, I love poker. I want to work with poker players. And he's like, yeah, you have some mindset knowledge. Let's go this direction. I'm like, sure. And right now, I think I have one of the biggest growing poker brands in 2021, and I'm super proud of that. Mm-hmm. And I think another thing that I see in people is that first, most problems are self-made, right? It's like we create our own problems, but it's just like part of the game, right? Part of life. And second of all, there are like so many forms of self-sabotage in people, and it's like nothing bad or so. It's just like normal. And sometimes we are blind to these things. Sometimes people come in the call and I ask them simple questions and they're like, oh, I get it. Oh my God. I'm like, yeah, it's like 5 minutes in the call, right? I'm like, okay. Right? Sometimes we are blind to certain problems, certain aspects. And that is normal because when you take a look at your brain, you have like 80 to 90% of the same thoughts from yesterday. If you don't actively work on getting new thoughts in with like reading books or stuff like that, listening to a good podcast, for example. Mm. But if you don't do that, you usually end up having 80 to 90% of the same thoughts from the day before. Right? And of course, you can get blind to certain problems or solutions. So having someone on your side who basically like asks the right questions and maybe like guides you in a way, like you can see crazy improvements. And I would say, since I work with my coach, right, my business coach, the things I learned about the economy, business, branding, stuff like that, like to figure this out on my own, I think it would took me 10 years or so, or even more. Mm. And basically, if you have someone who's specialized in a field and can give you all this knowledge, that is a dream. And with the internet, and that's the last point, with the internet, we have access to amazing people from all over the world. And I think that the core message of this podcast, that's what I want to share with people from nearly 8 years of coaching experiences. If people cannot resonate with me, I'm fine with that, right? I'm 100% fine. But if there is an area of life that you want to improve, don't let ego get involved, and try to find someone in the whole world that offers some coaching that can help you. And this can improve the quality of your life tremendously.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to add to something that you said about you working with your business coach. And you said, well, I could figure these things out. It would probably take me 10 years or something. I think we often forget, and especially, well, I'm actually not sure if it's true, but I think a lot of poker players are prone to believe that they can just do everything or anything, right? Well, I can do anything. Sure, business, yeah, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to watch some YouTube videos. I'm going to do this. I'm going to be on top of things. And that might be true. But if it's not the area what you're passionate about, why are you wasting your time? Focus on what you're passionate about. Let somebody else help you in the areas which are not your areas. Because listen, if you haven't thought about, well, mental game is so important, I really want to dig into it, why all of a sudden you're going to become a mental game expert, right? Just get somebody who can nudge you in the right direction. And perhaps you're going to end up researching yourself a lot. But that first initial nudge, that first initial direction, it's so important. And in so many areas, I mean, especially nowadays with the internet, it's so easy to get help on so unlimited, basically, things. Even if you want to, like nowadays, if you want to learn a piano and you don't want to hire a teacher, why wouldn't you get somebody online to guide you through the process? Right, sure, you can just do it yourself, but at least you're probably going to get some sort of an app, I would assume nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and people always want to have the shortcut, right? People always say, like, what is the shortcut with this? Or what's the shortcut with that? And I would say, like, having a coach is basically the shortcut. That's the answer. But people sometimes don't want to hear this, right? Yeah. They're like, the ego is involved, or they're like, nah, mindset is bullshit or stuff like that, right? But
yeah, and also,
that's a shortcut, in my opinion.
A lot of people have this problem with value. It's easy to put value on, let's say you buy a car, well, this car market value is such and such. You buy a watch, market value such and such. You buy coaching, it's like, well, I think it's worth like this. The coach is saying it's worth this much. So where's the truth, etc. Right? Because and for some people, there's always going to be this problem of like, oh, I don't know, I think I'm paying too much, etc., etc. And I had an experience with the coach that I hired, not poker related things, and I paid a lot of money to him. And I think I got my value out of the first 15 minutes of the first conversation, right? I was like, okay, well, it was worth it, right? And the rest of it to me just doesn't matter anymore. And I'm sure that somebody would go through the same coaching, through the same experience, and in the end of all the sessions, they would still feel like, nah, it wasn't worth it, right? So it's such a subjective thing. And sometimes we just have to accept that these small improvements in our life, small nudges, they have potential to make a huge difference long term, and that's what matters.
Yeah, like that is something that I think we talked about this a little bit previously. I asked the same questions to Ben Heath, who works with Elliot Rowe, and asked him, like, how is it tangible, right? How can you like measure your mindset improvement? And he's like, yeah, it's, of course, mindset is not tangible. Like compared, like if you go to a fitness coach, he's like, yeah, you get your 6-pack back in 8 weeks or whatever. And you're like, okay, that is tangible. But he said something that really made me smile, because he said, yeah, it's not tangible, but you know the difference. You know the difference. You will notice. And yeah, that is why I think that if you start to work on your mind, of course, like it's a little bit of a question mark what comes out at the end. But I always calculate when I'm in a call with someone who's interested in my coaching, I take the other route. Before our call, I had a call with a UK player who was interested in my coaching, and he said to me, "Yeah, I tilt a lot, and it costs me a lot of money." I'm like, okay. Like I said, like the stakes that you play, he plays like tournaments and cash both. I'm like, okay. So let's take like a cash game table and you tilt. How often do you tilt? He's like, once a week. I'm like, okay. So how much did you lose the last time you tilt, right? He's like, yeah, it was very brutal, around like 2K or so, 2-3K. I'm like, okay, let's take 2K, and you say you tilt once a week. So 4 times 2 is like 8K. So getting rid of tilt would be 8K worth for you, right? He's like, maybe. I'm like, right? So, and of course you have like the long-term effects as well. But I know that poker players always think in terms of return of investment. And if you can show them working with a mindset coach has a lot of return of investment, it can save you money. Then I think this gives you at least a little bit of measurability, if that is the word.
Yeah, definitely. If you try to put it tangible, but also I think too many people overthink it, right? They want to, like, they know they need help with their mental game, but they're trying to window shop for deals of like, And I think the best way to approach it is just find somebody you want to work with and just work with them, because eventually it's the person that matters, and go for it. And anyway, speaking of the person, I feel like we covered a lot of ground today. It's a good time to wrap up. Karim, where can people find you, and where can they reach out to you? Where could they follow you?
Yeah, so easiest would be on social media. I always say my DMs are open for everyone. I want to be like as close to the people as possible. I think that's also something that differentiates me. So if someone has a question or whatever, the easiest would be social media. I think you can link like my Facebook and Instagram down below, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we will.
Yeah, and I also have a website, which is like my name, first name, last name.com. That's my website if people want to do some research about me. And I think this would be the easiest.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely have all the links in the description. And I want to thank you for your time. It was very interesting. We took it some unexpected turns, but eventually I think everything makes sense, and it's a nice full circle that we went today.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of topics, and this shows that, we both of us, we have a lot of knowledge in many different areas, and that is the beautiful stuff. Sometimes you go into a podcast, you don't know which direction it takes, but at the end, I think we had a great podcast, and I think people will like it.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Check out the description, and of course, I'd highly appreciate if you subscribe, click like, spread the word about the podcast. Also, if you'd like to receive a regular newsletter with my key takeaways about each episode, go ahead and subscribe to it on runchukspodcast.com. That's RUNCHUKS podcast.com. I write those myself, I take it seriously, and I really enjoy the interaction with the readers, so I hope you'll sign up, and I'll be back for you next time. Thank you.